Welcome, beautiful souls. Hannah here from Reality Awareness, of course. This is a supercharged, super interesting, freaking amazing. This is my whoa, game changer realizations that I've had yesterday. Yes, yesterday. They were massive, and I was sharing it in my Trust Intuition live stream support call yesterday. And all this morning, it was like, you have to share this publicly. You have to share this publicly. And I'm like, it's so big, but it's a game changer. And I have a responsibility to share this with you because this could change your life too. This is so huge. And I'm like, wow, just such a game changer on so many levels, So as always, let me share this, and I shall be present with you with this one because this is if you're not ready to change your life, just don't even watch this live stream because the realization alone will shift you. You'll be like, oh, and you'll be unthreading all this stuff. So look out, look out for this live stream. Okay, let me share this consciously so I don't muck it up. Okay, hang on a second. Where are we? Yes, we're here. Okay. It's not letting me. Okay, let's go back. Start again. Hi, Benjamin. When you're joining live, let me know you're here. Say hi. If this is your first time to my live stream, of course, let me know where you're from around the world. I would love to hear where you're from. And also, if you're watching the replay, let me know if you're watching replay or if you're live. This one is a big one. It's big. Well, the realization's big. And hey, maybe I'll share it and you'll be like, oh no, that's not much at all. But I was sharing it in my Trust Intuition live stream last night and I was like, nah, this is big. And everyone in there was like, whoa, this is just changed everything for me. I was like, I know, right? I'm like, wow, this is just huge. Okay, nearly there. Hi, Aletta and Lee and Allison. Hi. Okay. Perfect. Done. And I'll bring it up here as always. So I'm about to do this live stream. I am doing this live stream. It's like I'm telling my daughter, I'm like, just about to do this live stream. Okay, I'll just bring up the comments here so I can see. So, and then we're going into the Reality Awareness support group for the Intuitive Healing Tuesday. So if you're not in my free group, let me know, send me a message and I can add you to that group. And that is where you can ask me any question at all about, and then we're going in, don't need to hear me twice, about anything you need support with, guidance, whatever's going on for you. And I'm basically working with you like I would my clients, and Intuitive Healing Tuesdays. Okay, yes, you did discover me today. Lovely to have you here. It's so awesome. Okay, so who am I without my childhood patterns? Who am I without my trauma? And who am I without my recovering codependent label? This is really massive, right? This is so massive because as you guys know my story, and if you don't know my story, some things might not make sense, but just bear with me, right? So, okay, I'm just gonna flick this around because, yeah, that's better because then you guys can see my moon. That's better. So, huge questions. Little bit of backstory so you've got a kind of understanding of where this has come from. So if you've been following me, you would have seen that over the time I put my prices up, put my prices down, change everything, and I'm always changing things, right? Now some people might say that's part of a trauma response. Always changing things. I always used to change my bedroom around all the time as a kid, change the house around, change the furniture around, I don't know, is it? I don't know. The point is that, as you know as well, back in end of December, I was okay, I'm not doing one-on-one sessions anymore, and I needed to change things. I literally burnt out doing what I was doing. That's the reality of it. and it wasn't sustainable with what I was doing anymore, right? So as I've gone, along, like this kind of point, like every single day, as I shared the other day, every single day since that point, I've had people message me, do you do distance healings? Are you doing psychic readings? Like just every day there's something, and I'm like, okay, so I got really clear. I'm doing one-on-one sessions again, right? And in a very different capacity, right? So still doing the same thing, but yes, of course, my prices have increased because it wasn't sustainable with how busy that I was getting and hence the burning out for what I was working for. It just wasn't sustainable. Now, I had to stop everything to get clear on that. But this stopping in this past 6 weeks has been like the biggest change of my life ever. And I know that it's combined with so many different factors all rolled into one, right? Now, in the middle of, it was probably the first or second week of January, it was the second week of January, I had like this massive big realization. And I was listening to this audio and it was like something just clicked. And I was like, oh, I actually don't have to do anything other than what I'm doing to take myself, my life, and my business to the next level. Like, it was a really big deal, right? Hi, Gail. So that, I know it doesn't seem like a big deal. It was a really massive deal for me because I'm like, oh, I have to do more in order to be more and to expand. I have to do more and provide more and be of more service. It doesn't work like that. You just physically can't do more. I need 10 of me's. That doesn't happen, right? So, and that's where I was so conflicted for so long. And then the other piece that I was really conflicted on for so long was well, if I put my prices up, I can't serve people, which is just going to make logical sense, right? But I was so worried that I wouldn't be able to serve the people that I wanted to serve and help the people that I wanted to help if I put my prices up. And so hence over the past 2 years, it's been up, down, up, down, up, down. And that in itself is tiring as well, right? So coming into this space around who am I without my childhood patterns? Who am I without my trauma? Who am I without my recovering codependent label? And the reality is I don't know. I don't know, right? People always okay, you have to be better and be more and expand to the next level and do what you do. And I'm but I don't know, who is that person, right? And the thing is that in trying to find that, all that I've been hitting against is this trauma from my childhood. That's all I've been hitting against. And I'm well, I don't know. And there's a lot of people that don't know these things as well because we're so blocked with all this stuff, or our childhood patterns and our childhood trauma is that is who we are. And so to try and break out of that and be someone different just doesn't really we can't even comprehend it. Yeah. And so we can visualize our best life and do all these things. But the reality is it's well, what is that even? Yeah, okay, we might have an idea about it, but then we're trying and trying and trying and trying, and it doesn't really work. In a way. It does to an extent, right? And then we kind of hit up these kind of pattern blocks is what I'm going to call them. Now, there's so much more that I could delve into about this, and I went into the full story in my Trust Intuition group last night. So, but the point, the pieces I want to share here is that, how I've been saying, I've been put in this, for the past 2 years, I feel my voice has been suppressed, and I lost myself, and I've been depressed and at this plateau. How I've been saying that, right? And obviously been trying to dig and find out, I'm what is that? And then back in October last year, so if you're in my reality awareness support group, like I said, you may have seen where I was sharing in depth about the trauma that I'm referring to, right? And in that uncovering with the sessions at this amazing therapist who's multi-talented in all his therapies, and was doing all this craniosacral and stuff on my neck and shoulder and all this sort of stuff, and it pulled this trauma out that it's kind of interesting, right? Because a lot of people have a lot of trauma from their childhood and upbringing in their life, right? And a lot of us, some people know specifically what incidences and what traumas and all that sort of thing, and then there's some people who just don't really know like, they don't know specifically, but they know there's all this stuff that happened that it's just made them have a crap life or created all these patterns that they're trying to work and heal and whatever, right? Now, that's always been my case, even though I know there's been specific things that have surfaced over the many years that I've been doing this personal development work, but nothing has surfaced quite as big as what did in October. And I feel like that's the core of it, right? Like, of course, there's probably others and blah, 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 but you know, this is what's currently going on. Now, that was in October. It took me until December to actually share about it. It was that traumatic for me, I guess, right? And when I shared that, I felt like a big relief. I was like, okay, cool. Like, okay, like that's good. It's out and open, I'm done, right? And then still all this stuff happened January in the past couple of weeks. So Lee says that feels where I've been the last few weeks. Exactly, right? And Gail's like, I get it. Yes, right. So with this piece, so where do I want to go with this? Okay, so who am I without my childhood patterns? Who am I without my trauma? Who am I without my recovering codependent label? Now that third one, the who am I without my recovering codependent label, that kind of came to me, I think around Christmas time or just before. I was just like, man, I'm so tired of that label. I'm like, I'm not that fucking person anymore. I haven't even been dating or anything. I'm like, I'm just like, stop with that label already, right? Like, okay, I'm done with that. I'm out of there. I'm not that person anymore. Like, of course, there's bits and we're always working on it. It's always layers, right? It's not like, oh, I'm healed. Like, I'm perfect. Like, no, far from it. But it was like, I'm done with that label. And then, like, the past 2 to 3 weeks, all this trauma has, like, been in my face again, you know, and it was kind of like, okay, there's this issue going on and there's this issue going on, and I'm working with my mentor and I was like, this happening and this happening, and then she's like, yeah, well, I've already told you this bit and this bit, and I'm like, she's like, I don't know, whatever she said, and I was like, you know what, because I was tuning into it, I'm like, you know what, all this stuff and this stuff and this issue and this issue, that's just surface stuff. That is literally just surface stuff, because at the core of it, underneath, is this trauma just stuck in my bones since I was 6. Like, that's at the core. It doesn't matter about this issue and this issue and this issue, and we could like talk about this for 10 days or 10 years or like work on this issue. It's actually not got anything to do with it. That's like a symptomatic cause of this one. And I was so pissed. I was so angry last week. Like Friday, Saturday was just like, I don't know, the energies have been intense, right? And then I've been working through all this stuff. Remember a couple of weeks back, and I said it's like a sieve going through everyone at the moment, and it's like pulling out the trauma, like it cannot stay there anymore. Like the trauma is being sieved out of our system. Like that's what's going on, right? So anyway, Friday, Saturday was just like, oh my God. And I was so angry because I knew that this was the core, and I was so pissed about it because it's kind of like, you know, you hear people say like, just choose something different and just, you know, think something different and just, it's, you know, like just choose it not to be there anymore. And it's like, man, like this is something that's been embedded in my bones for 30 odd years. It's not going to shift overnight. Like that came up. So what is it, October? So about 3 or 4 months ago now. Like that's when it really like surfaced in my consciousness, was shifting out of my body. Like it's a process that doesn't just shift overnight. There's shock, there's grief, there's disbelief, there's rage. Like that I've been living this way for so long, and that this trauma has created all these patterns. Everything stems back to this one core thing, right? And at that one core thing is so intertwined, you know, because I had my voice shut down because I shared something. And then that's when everything started. It was like, you know, so it's kind of interesting, this whole like voice suppression stuff, you know, and everything like coming back now, right? So I just wanted to share this, okay? Because, yeah, Lee says, choose new beliefs. Like, it's hard work to let go when they've been there for 30 years. Yeah, in my wealth activation codes, in my mini course, that like actually work with that specifically, because it, you know, like we can choose all these new beliefs. Yeah, like they're all like lines that come down into this trauma. But if we're not shifting this out, we're not shifting that core root out, and then also working and pulling all the rest of the roots out, it's kind of like you're either doing one or the other. Like it's a whole thing, right? So yeah, you get it, right? It's hard to shift when it's been there. It's hard work, right? It's hard work, and it's consistent work, right? And this is the thing. It's like, oh, just choosing not to be there anymore. It's like, man, like this has impacted my entire life, let alone all the codependent relationships, all the trauma from all those relationships, like my full-on drug addiction, like, you know, working in a strip club, like, you know, falling pregnant, like, yeah, let's just like shift it overnight, like choosing not to, like, no. Right? Now, some people might be like, oh, well, you're being in victim mode, Hannah. And I'm like, just hear me out, okay? Because it gets to a point where we get sick of it as well, right? But it's a process, right? It's like we just like have this realization like back in October, like there's no way I was like, okay, like let's just choose it not to be there. Like, man, I was bawling my eyes out like I was 6 years of age, because I also got more in trouble for bawling my eyes out at that point in time. So it was all this stored grief from that moment, let alone the shock and the unraveling of like how that's like created my life, and it explains everything. So I was in this rage because I knew that this was what was underneath, but I was so tired of it. And I was already asking myself the questions like, well, who am I without this trauma? Like, if this is the trauma that's created my entire life and my entire, like, patternings and choices and belief systems and, like, you know, like, yeah. And I want to say that this point here where I'm talking about of, like, getting, like, I'm sick of it, I'm tired of it, like, that's come from, you know, like I said, 3 to 4 months of grieving, of being angry, of being in shock, of like the sheer like size of like, wow, my life has been built around this subconsciously. And like, do you know what I mean? Like this has been like 3 to 4 months of processing all of this, that I've now come to this point end of last week, going like just enraged because I'm so freaking tired of it. I'm like, oh my God, like this has like been like 36 years of just like, oh, this, like, you know, like, tired of it is an understatement, right? So yeah, totally sick of it. Still work to do. Yeah, of course, right? Again, like this, like finally getting over it and sick of it is still not shift overnight, in a sense of like, this is now a different part of the process, right? Now, when I, you know, so I started like being so angry, I was like, well, who am I without it? Like, if this is how I've been this whole entire time for 36 years, who am I without this trauma? Who am I without this childhood pattern and all the codependent stuff that it's friggin' stemmed from? Like, who am I without that? And the answer didn't come. Like, the answer didn't come. Like, for 3 days, I was asking this question. Like, you know, my mentor had said to me, she's like, well, who are you without it? And I'm like, that's the question I've just been asking myself. You know, so I'm like sitting there, I'm like, who am I without this childhood trauma? Who am I without this codependent label? Like, I don't know, right? But I kept asking those questions. Now, something friggin' huge happened from me asking these questions. Like, this is massive. And I needed to share that little bit so you've got that kind of understanding where it's all coming from in a way, right? So, going back to... See, I haven't really told you guys publicly. I haven't shared this stuff publicly. So I'm like putting the pieces together for you because this realization needs to be shared. This is life-changing, okay? For you guys too, because you'll start to just go, whoa, hang on, and you'll reassess everything, right? And make sure it's you. So, okay, so I've always had a vision of having a retreat center. It's not a retreat center and it's not a retreat center. Ever since I've had my spiritual awakening when I was 21, I always knew that I was going to own lots of land and turn it into this beautiful sanctuary of edible gardens and places that we can come and do retreats and stay and all these healing, amazing things. Like since I was 21. When I had my spiritual awakening, that's all I could see. And I even painted it on this beautiful big painting, like this massive canvas back just before I had a day, I think. This beautiful big painting of this land. Like, I've just had this vision since then, right? And I'm brave. Thank you. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it. So I've had this big vision, and it's been there for a long time. Now, when I moved into this house, I got reminded of this vision because I forgot that I originally came online to build my business online, to create the foundation for this big picture vision, which is being able to purchase land and have, like have center, like this first center here on the coast, and then it'll be, around the world, right? I'd forgotten about that vision. I just got so busy doing my thing and creating and learning and all sorts of things that I forgot why I'd started online, right? But when I moved into this house, I was like, oh, that's right. And it kind of recalibrated me to like, oh, this is what I'm doing it for. It was awesome. I was so grateful to remember that. Now, I was like, yeah, like, got work to do, all good, right? Beginning of December, no, just before Christmas, I'd been to like my local town, when I go food shopping, and I get a coffee and I wait for my coffee outside, and the next door like shop is a real estate agent. And so while I'm waiting for my coffee, I'm just like looking at all the houses on the window, right? And I'd been there several times, and this one particular time just before Christmas, the guy walks out and he's like, oh, can I help you? And I was like, I guess so. And then I was looking at this one property because I always look at all the properties and I'm always drawn back to this one property. And I was like, this one, this one here. And, long story short is I ended up going and having a look at the property, and I was like, okay, universe, obviously you think that I'm more ready than I realized. So I'm like, okay, let's do this, right? So went and looked at this property. It's bigger acreage than what I'm on now. Beautiful home, like everything's immaculate. The land is so very cared for. It was a big kind of eye-opener to where I am now, like just being able to care for the land that much, and being able to, I don't know, it was amazing. And so anyway, I'm like, cool. Got the vision. Now it's even more into reality because the universe knows that I'm obviously more ready than I realized. So I'm like, cool. I'm trusting my intuition every step of the way. It's just like everything else I've ever done in my life, right? And so I said to the guy, I'd be ready by the end of February. I was like, cool, I'll be ready by the end of February. And so much has happened, obviously, between, then, that was just before Christmas, and now what, we're in the middle of February. In the process of still working on shifting out all this trauma, right? Like this is, it's a process, like I said, like there'll be waves of this next level of the thing coming out, which, there's been so much. You've seen me be angry and my voice being suppressed and all sorts of jazz, right? Now, in the process of me stopping all the one-on-one sessions, the beginning of, like at the end of last year, was a process of me just, I didn't realize, but I see it as just stopping everything so I could really get clear on what it is that I'm doing, right? And I know it might sound silly, but, I've had clients nonstop for like years, and because of like, I don't know, like losing my vision or like forgot that I was getting land for a retreat center, like, just all bits and pieces, right? And okay, so all of that is going to leave to the side for a minute. Last night in the Trust Intuition support call, we started talking about energetic wounds in our body, okay? And there's a group of us in there. It's quite amazing how it all works. And we're all sort of working on, it was father wound for a while, but it's kind of mother wound, so feminine healing. Surprise, right? And just trying to think what bits I really need to tell you. So, when you're around somebody and you feel really like oh, they're too much, like I need to get out, like, you know, and it's like the energy's just so strong and you're like, oh, and they're like, they feel really needy to you and they're like kind of pulling on your energy and they're like really needy people. Have you ever experienced that, right? Where you just like set your boundary, they're not listening, and then they're like, you know, they seem really needy. Like, have you ever experienced those sorts of people, right? And energetically, you walk away and you feel drained and you're like, oh, like what was that? And you're kind of in avoidance mode, right? Because you're just like, oh my God, it's like, I don't want to be around that people. Yeah, Haley says, yes, my mum. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because we're talking about it from a feminine perspective. So on an energetic level, and this is what I teach in Trust Intuition, that's why we're going through it in there, because this is what the course is about. Because when we're full of all these big trauma wounds in our energetic body, it clouds our intuition. We're not clear when we have all these traumas in our body, right? So big basis of Trust Intuition is helping you to remove trauma and to be able to work with that, and how do we function in society when we're like clouded or like all this stuff, right? So Aletta says most relationships. I've said, yeah. Vicky says my son. Yeah, okay, you guys get it, right? That feeling. Now, that can also feel like pressure. It's like we're like in avoidance of it because we're like, oh, go away. But it can feel like pressure. Like it feels like energetic pressure around you, you know, like just, oh, it's kind of like, it's hard to describe. But if I describe it as energetic pressure. Now, without going into the ins and outs of wounds and trauma and, you know, all the bits and pieces, those feelings, right? What I discovered, okay, and it was interesting, we were talking about that, and then I, you know, shared deeply with more details than you guys are getting about everything I'm sharing now. So that trauma and that energetic pressure, okay, we're just going to leave that information to the side as well, okay? So really important to know all these little bits and pieces. So back to the questions of who am I without my childhood patterns? Who am I without my trauma? Who am I without my recovering codependent label, right? Now, since Friday, being so angry that I'm like so tired of this trauma, like, oh, who am I without this? And like that piece, asking those questions. Yesterday, I had this like huge revelation. Like it changed everything. So I was writing Tuesday Tarot, and I always get so much information when I'm writing Tuesday Tarot. It takes me like several hours because I'm stopping and writing all this stuff down. Like it's just like there's so much information that comes through when I do that. And I kind of remember how it kind of came through, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, who am I without these childhood traumas? Who am I without these labels, these codependent labels? Who am I without that? I know that I'm still going to have land and the retreat center or whatever that looks like, healing center of some sort. Like that's definitely still happening. That's my big picture vision. That's always been in the plan. It's going to happen. However, like part of, I don't know when it kind of feels, just, I don't know, well, maybe the past 6 weeks, maybe since I went and saw it, and like the property, right, and the house, I'm like, okay, cool, like, that's what I'm waiting for. There it is. That's the land. Like, and like I shared in Trust Intuition last night, I'm like, I haven't been honest with myself. I really haven't been honest with myself. It's been dropping in, but I've been brushing it aside. I've been pushing it aside. I haven't been honest with myself in a sense of, if I'm really honest with myself, the land is amazing. It had a beautiful energy. I loved it. I love it. But it's quite far away from the beach. My ultimate is I want it on the beach. Like I want acreage on the beach. Where is that possible? I don't know. But that's what I've always wanted, right? And the other reality is that I can't do that on my own. Like I've even been subconsciously and consciously thinking about it. Like, okay, well, how would I look after the cattle and how would I do that? And like, you know, I know what the house and all the shed and everything. And I was like, you know, like trying to figure it out. And I was feeling pressure. It's like pressure of like, I can't do all that on my own. And yeah, we hire people and all that sort of thing, but it's out in the country. Like it's further away than this place, right? And I'm like, you got to find the right person and blah, blah, blah. And I know we do that with a team and whatever, but It was just like pressure, that feeling, but I hadn't noticed it. Like it was there, but I hadn't noticed it. You know, when you're conscious of something, but you're not. But that pressure feeling, that's been a normal feeling of how I've been forever in my life, right? In a way. And the divine revelation that dropped in yesterday was that vision, that dream of having property now, that's not mine. That's actually my dad's. Now, Dad, if you're watching, you might say, Hannah, that's not my dream. But the point here around it is that's actually my dad. That's actually my family system to have property, especially cattle. Maybe in the red outback, like the red dirt outback in the outback Australia. But that's actually a family web. You know how I talk about it as a web, family lineage. That's my family lineage. As soon as I realized that, I was like, because how that realization dropped in, like I was typing away, and then all of a sudden it was like, look for rentals, like look for houses at this particular suburb on the Sunshine Coast. Now, on the ocean, on the coast. And I'd forgotten that years ago, I was like, if I was going to live anywhere on the Sunshine Coast, it would be there. And I'd forgotten about that too. In all the kerfuffle of whatever I've been doing in the past few years, I'd forgotten that was where I was always going to live. And you know, like went on this big 5-month road trip last year to try and find our home. Like, right. Huge. I know it doesn't seem like much, but the piece that I want you guys to look at is like, as soon as I realized that, because when I looked at houses, it was like this house on the beach. I'm like, I can go surfing every day. Now, people have been asking me, have you been missing the beach? And I'm like, no. And then like, they were like picking it up before I was, sort of thing. I'm like, no, I got a saltwater pool. I'm all good. Like, if I didn't have that, I definitely would be. But people have been saying it to me. And then like, I think it was like the second last week of January. That's when I started to feel, I was like, oh, I'm missing the ocean. It was kind of interesting, right? And so when I saw this house, I was just like, and I was looking at it, I'm like, oh my God, that's the one. That's actually the house. Now, it's not on property. It's not on big acreage, but it's a house on the beach in the suburb that I've always wanted to live on the Sunshine Coast. And I'm like, this is a no-brainer. Who am I without my childhood patterns? Who am I without my family web lineage? Who am I without my codependent label? Who am I without my trauma? Oh my God, this is what I want. I want to live on the beach and I want to surf, right? To have property and have the retreat center. Yeah, I do want to do that, but not yet. Like if I'm honest with myself, it's so interesting because divine step number 1 in the 12 divine steps to awakening your life purpose that we just did in January in the reality awareness support group. The first step is honesty. Honesty with yourself. And I'm like, man, I haven't been honest. I'm like, that house is a lot of work. I would burn out and I already was feeling the energetic pressure from it. I'm like, oh, to like be on the beach and surf every day and still do what I love. Like, oh my God, I was just like, and the thing is that it's in a suburb. I said I didn't want to live in a suburb because I didn't want to be around all this world stuff going on, right? That's why I moved out here. So I was looking for a place. That's why I got in the car for lockdown. I'm like, we're not staying in suburb for lockdown. But at this house, I was like, oh, yeah, on the beach, the house that I want. And in the other part of the honesty with it is that whilst that property is amazing and I love it, like what's been kind of like building up here is like how much work it is to have a property. I mean, I don't even maintain the big acreage. Like that's the farmer's job. But like still, there's still all this work. Like it's kind of interesting. And I'm just like, man, like this is not sustainable because all I want to do is finish this next stage of my business, which has always been in the 10-year plan before the retreat center and the land. I was like, wow, I was jumping ahead of myself. So that energetic pressure that I felt suddenly lifted, you know, and, you know, because of my family lineage of having properties and then it got sold and, you know, and my dad, like, you know, being out on property now is just like, that's not like, you know, like, and it's so interesting. The other piece about this, do you guys remember when I first went on my road trips last year? I gotta jump off in a second because I've got to jump in for Intuitive Healing Tuesdays. But do you remember last year when I first went on the road trips, I actually didn't go to Victoria first. I went to my dad's place in Outback, Australia, and out in the bush, and I was there. And if you guys remember, I got a splinter in my toe, which I didn't put peroxide on. If you put peroxide on, you never get infections. Like, I'm always pouring peroxide on any cut that I have, right? The one time I didn't put peroxide on, and then Dad went away for a couple of days, and I'm like, man, I can't get this splinter out. It was like a piece of mulga, and it's like gets infected so easily. I literally had to go to the hospital because it was emergency hospital. Like, I don't know what day it was, whatever. I went to the emergency hospital and like went there, and that's where I was born. Like, that was the hospital I was born. And they're like, oh, are you still on such and such station, like the cattle station? I'm like, no. And I literally had to change my address, and it was so significant of like unthreading the core of who I am, unthreading family like webs that has created my life. Like, it's not that I don't enjoy that or I hate that or anything like that. It's just this interesting process that I'm going through to discover who I am and step into who I am and be who I am. It's like been this process of doing that. So last year I was at the hospital I was born at 36 years ago, had to change my address. So that's so significant of unplugging from that home birth lineage. Like, this significant, right? And I realized at the time, I was like, this is significant, and that's why I had to get the splinter. Like, it was insane, right? And then now it's a year later, February, and I'm realizing that the dreams and the way that I was living and doing everything myself, and, you know, living like have big property and do all that myself, like, that's exhausting. And it's also just what my family lineage has done. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, like, game changer. Because if I think about living on the beach and surfing every day, being able to surf every day, and being able to finish my, you know, 5-year plan before I move on to the next 5-year plan, because that's still in there. But it's like trying to do it now. I was like, no wonder I was like feeling pressure and exhaustion and all. It's like, as soon as I just flicked out of that, I was just like, wow, it's like, I feel lighter. And like I said, all the fear about all the world stuff, like when I feel and think about living on the beach and being able to surf every day, and just like, that fear's not even there. It's like, it's not even in existence. It's like a whole nother reality. And that for me is so significant, because when we really look at where that trauma was stemming from, that trauma sits there and it's just full of fear. Like, it's just like, that's, you know, because when we've been traumatized, we're freaking in fear. Like massive. So I really encourage you to look at, like, you know, like the things that you're trying to manifest or want to happen now, or trying to make it do this now. Like, yeah, like I said, you know, I still know I want property and to have like a healing retreat center, whatever it is, right? This vision that I've had since 2005, that's still happening, but I was trying to force it now. And the way I'm living now is like doing it all myself or something. Like, you know, the reality is like, I want to clean up. Well, I've got to clean every week, but I want a personal assistant. I want a personal chef. Like, and living so far out of town, out in the country, that's not really, like, of course it could happen, but logistically it doesn't really work, right? Whereas if I'm next to the beach in my friggin' like beach house, like, oh my God, my soul was like, oh, there's Hannah. Who am I? Who am I without my childhood trauma? Who am I without my recovering codependent label? Who am I without my childhood patterns? I'm like, oh, there's Hannah. There's Hannah. There she is. And it's just full of joy. I'm just like, oh, that one. Thank you very much. Huge. Massive. These like synchronicities all over. Yeah, of course, right? Oh, Haley says it's amazing how we unconsciously take on our family's history as part of what we want when in reality it's not ours. Yeah, it's so interesting, right? So interesting. I mean, like, I love animals, right? But even like moving into this house and then having the rats and having the cats and everything straight, or like, it was like straight away. I was like, hang on a sec, how did this happen? And I was like, oh, this is what I grew up in. Like, I was, you know, I was very conscious. Like when I was like, how did this happen all of a sudden? Like, it's so much work cleaning cages and I love them, but cleaning litter trays. And I was like, oh man, like, how did this happen? You know, it was like subconscious, automatic, like, you know, to create the same family system, I guess, in a way, of what I grew up in. I was surrounded by animals. Like, I love them, like, don't get me wrong, but do you know what I mean? It was just another, like, I was just like, hang on a sec, I didn't plan for this, like, in a way, you know what I mean? Oh my God, it's so massive, right? Allison says, I asked myself just this weekend, yeah, like, this is huge. You know how I've been saying to you guys, I'm like, the energy is like a sieve pulling out the trauma at the moment. So right on point, right? Can't get the song out of my head. Give me land, lots of land with the sunny skies above, don't fence me in. Yeah, I think that's why I want my freedom. Like, I think, you know, everything I needed to go through everything, you know, and I know as well that it's not like, oh, I have to wait until, you know, 5 years and I've finished all this stuff to then get the land. It's kind of like, I know that it'll be like it's already in process, you know, but it's like now I can do it while being supported at the beach. And Haley says, who doesn't love a good litter tray clean? I'm like, I know, right? And this is why I'm like, I need a personal assistant. I need a housekeeper, not just a cleaner, because I don't want to be doing this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so this is where I'm like, yeah, something's got to shift in this. Like, who am I without this? And I'm like, this is massive. This is so massive. This is a game changer. Like, imagine if I was trying to force, like, imagine if I bought that land and then it would just be like stressful and like my work would be behind of my plan because, you know, of course it's my plan, I could change it, etc. But I feel agitated if I'm not doing what my soul's calling me to do and like trying to look after more land and cattle and stuff and maintain that. Like, nah, not yet. Not yet. Yeah, Lee says, I've been avoiding answering those questions for sure. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it changes our total direction. Like, it's given me a total life direction change, but I suddenly feel happy. I suddenly feel like life's worth living again, even though I wasn't in that darker space. Not this February. Many Februaries ago I was. Which is kind of interesting. It's like a birthing portal, right? So interesting. So yeah, I jump on Intuitive Healing Tuesday now in the Reality Awareness Support Group. So you might want to jump on over and join me there. Or if you're watching the replay and you didn't catch it, every Tuesday I'm in the Reality Awareness Support Group on Facebook. It's free. You just have to be a member in the group. So send me a message if you're not, and I can send you the link to join. Or you can type in the Facebook search bar, Reality Awareness Support Group, and it will come up there for you. And yeah, I'm going to jump in there now. So ask yourself those questions and kind of reassess, and don't get scared about it. Sometimes we're like, oh my God, my whole life is like that. But it's a process in discovering who you are so that you can live without that pressure and without that stress. Because when we're trying to live somebody else's reality, whether it's something that someone said or a family system or something you thought you had to be someone or do more, which is what I've been unraveling as well, that is like, that just lifts, all of a sudden you're free. There's the freedom, right? All right. I love you guys heaps.